Chapter 21. The sun bathed the entire area in light, shining brightly off the gentle cobblestones and worn brick. I once then partially closed my eyes. The brightness was just a little too much to be comfortable to me. My eyes hurt and my stomach still ached from throwing up on the stupid train. Still, as irritable as I felt, the city was quite impressive. I'd never seen such a grand city in Equestria. Row after row of buildings greeted my mostly healed eyes. The main street was practically alive with ponies, easily 3 times the traffic of Ponyville. The buildings I could see mainly appeared to be cafes, shops, and other entertainment establishments. The fanfare was quite a sight to take in. Of course, extra banners appeared to be up, advertising a formal dance and fashion show put on by one Fancy Pants. I wonder if Rarity knew who that was. Speaking of, Rarity herself looked almost giddy as she sat next to me on the right. Ooh, it's been too long since I've been here. I must see if there are any new supplementary fabrics before the show, Twilight, she quickly informed, looking past me to the left. My fellow friend nodded absently while going over a list she held up in her magic. I figured as much and planned accordingly. We have 3 hours before we're expected to be at the banquet hall to get ready. Meet us at the castle in 2 hours so we can dress, okay? Twilight suggested, looking over at her overly exuberant friend. Rarity nodded pleasantly, neatly done mane bobbing with one motion. She then stood up and pranced off towards the rows of shops, a certain lightness to her step. I watched her go, trying to figure out where she got the energy. Oh well. I suppose the entire ordeal was kind of her thing. She'll never change. Not like that's a bad thing, though. Todd agreed unknowingly to my inner thoughts, shifting her attention back to me with a smile. I turned back to her and nodded pleasantly. It's nice to watch somebody who really knows what they enjoy the most. Pink is the same way to some degree, I observed idly, wondering if I'd ever show that level of excitement for something. Twilight let out a chuckle before warning. I wouldn't mention that comparison to Rarity. She likes to hold herself above the spacicle of energy Pinkie demonstrates. Above? There was nothing wrong with Pinkie's energy that would lower it in the first place. I must defend Pinkie, stating that her mannerisms are certainly admirable as well, I protested, frowning slightly. The lone unicorn nodded without missing a beat, nor losing her smile. Of course. They're just very different. But we're delaying too much. I need to speak with the castle staff and arrange rooms for the 3 of us. You don't mind staying with me, right? She asked, standing up again and carefully sliding her rolled-up list into her saddlebag. Of course not, I assured, sticking my tongue out at her before adding, we slept together last night and it turned out nicely. It was amazing to have a night without nightmares, which I totally credit to the beautiful mirror I got to cuddle with. I couldn't help but blush a little as I tried to emphasize exactly how much I appreciated her. Her cheeks flared up with a hot blush of their own, but she only smiled wider. Mender, you're just so... I don't even know what to say, she complimented, tone of voice betraying a completely different mood. Her eyes also softened, a warm feeling behind them that I couldn't quite place. Just the truth, Twilight. And do you want me to come with? I asked, pretty sure that I already knew the answer. She giggled, informing, you can just call me Twi if you want. It feels more intimate and informal. And no, I need you to make a brief detour and pick up some food to go before joining me. Erda will be hungry as well when she gets back, and we need to eat before the party. Food? I questioned, tilting my head at her. Wait, she wanted me to wander off by myself to run an errand in a totally unfamiliar city? Twilight nodded politely, oblivious to my nervousness. Yep, it doesn't matter where, as long as it's edible. Enough for all 3 of us, of course. I'll give some bids for it, she furthered, levitating a small pink coin bag out of her saddlebags and hooking it onto mine. Great. Pink. Okay. I just ask for it and go? I asked, largely for clarity. This is going to go poorly. It was almost a foregone conclusion at this point, I had a feeling. She nodded excitedly before starting towards the massive castle that easily loomed above the rest of the town. Well, that was imposing. I wonder if Celestia was compensating for something, or if she just inherited the place like that. Yep, I'll put in a word with the guards to expect you, don't worry. Just hurry along so we can get situated into our rooms before the party, she returned, adding a wink as she pranced in place. My thoughts tinted my cheeks, and I coughed slightly, trying not to jump to conclusions about the implications. "Alright, I'll try to go as fast as I can," I assured, nodding to her and smiling. "Awesome! See you in a bit!" she exclaimed excitedly before disappearing in a flash of light and a little hop. I watched her flickering down the street a little ways, only to disappear again and repeat the short flickering in the direction of the palace. Damn. It must be nice to have a planet-sized pool of magic. Shaking my head, I turned my attention to the shops, looking for any restaurant-looking ones. An outdoor cafe would probably wouldn't be too expensive, and would likely be able to get the food in a hurry. Spotting cozy eating chairs furnished with oversized umbrellas, I smiled and headed in that direction, sporting a moderate gait. Besides being in a good mood lightened my spirits considerably. It was almost enough to let me forget about the sour look the stewardess gave me upon cleaning out the bucket earlier. I was careful of the crowds as best I could, making sure to stay clear of the clusters as I neared the cafe. It was a pleasant-looking spot, simplistic in design, yet looking very new and clean. I nodded to myself before approaching the entrance. Unfortunately, a couple appeared to be just leaving as I rounded from the sidewalk. I ground to a halt, started to backtrack a little. The sound looked large and imposing, yet very very proper and worldly. The mirror was lithe, the legs extremely long and groomed to make her seem slender and taller than she actually was. Unfortunately for me, and probably her as well, she paid me no attention and did a little twirl to face us down as they exit, a happy smile on her face. Oh crap. She collided with me almost instantly, causing both of us to spill sideways and become a tangled heap on the ground. I winced as I hit first, my body becoming effectively a squishy pillow for her impact. Oh wait, I'd rather it that way than the inverse. My eyes opened, then widened drastically as I was presented with a very detailed up-close view of her elegant, abstract cutie mark. "Ah! Hey!" she shouted, scrambling off me and glaring. I swallowed, ears lowering as her expression made me feel further pathetic. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to," I apologized profusely before slowly getting to my hose. The stallion stepped forward instead, however. "I do say, what are your intentions, young one? That is most disrespectful behavior to force upon a mare. Explain yourself," he demanded, frowning down at me as I shrunk further. His styled blue mane, nicely pressed suit, and radiant white coat made him look even more important. I knew this was a bad idea. His pink-maned mare leaned closer behind him, partially hiding herself from sight as I swallowed, tongue feeling like it was swelling in my mouth. Pink. My eyes widened as I caught another dot of pink below my vision and glanced down at the stonework. Twilight's coin bag lay at my feet, having been knocked loose in the collision. I checked my side, and sure enough, it was missing. I really didn't intend on landing like that. You surprised me, I tried to explain, before carefully picking the coin pouch up with my mouth. It smelled like twilight, which was a little distracting. Both their eyes widened as they watched me pick up the bag. "My bits!" the mare exclaimed, looking shocked. "Huh?" I glanced to her side and widened my eyes as well as I saw an almost exact duplicate of the tiny pink pouch tied to her saddlebag. "You scoundrel!" I heard the stallion declare before feeling a solid impact with the side of my head. Wincing, I stumbled sideways and cracked my head off the side of the entrance to the cafe before I could so much as explain otherwise. "Guards! Quickly!" he shouted, and his echoing voice of stars exploded into my vision. Ah! My head throbbed as I curled up, holding both sides of it. My vision danced and blurred as I pulled my right hoof back, blotches of red covering it. Crap. I didn't take anything. That's my filly friend's pouch, I groaned, trying to sit up again. Suddenly, I was knocked sideways by something extremely solid, shoving me into the side of the wall. I saw an imposing-looking guard standing over me with a glare when my eyes opened again. Lacking the energy, I didn't resist as he shoved metal cuffs around my hoofs. My eyes widened further as I watched the sharp metal lock around me, the chains going taut and rattling in my ears. The rattling. Chains. Her swimmer glittered through the haze from the dark, the blood dripping from her claws and blades as I was forced onto the table, screaming and missing an eye now. There was no healing from it. I watched her bite down on it and eat it myself. I screamed until I passed out, not realizing that's what actually happened. My world rapidly faded into the darkness that surrounded her. The darkness was miserable, of course. I shivered as I sat in the furthest corner of my tiny stone room. The looming metal bars cast an ominous shadow across the wall next to me. The wooden bed chained to the wall partially blocked the light from my lower body as I sat there, absolutely freezing. A rough wrapping had been tied around my head to stop the bleeding, but I hadn't been cleaned up. This place must be underground somewhere as well, because it was absolutely freezing. I had no idea where I was, apart from a jail cell with a very silent guard. I was on the wooden slab when I woke up in a cold sweat, thinking someone was ripping my muscles out one section at a time. I guess I had been arrested. This was an amazing attempt at getting food for Twilight and Rarity. The absolute silence was broken suddenly by solid, slow hoofsteps from the left of my cell entry. My eyes widened as they matched up fairly well to the pounding inside my skull, and I glanced back at the bars, shaking still. I must have lost a lot of blood as well. The hoofsteps stopped, and I saw the front of a rather large stallion, another unicorn, standing in front of the guard. His mane was striped in light and dark shades of blue in such a way that, interesting enough, reminded me of Twilight. His coat, however, was pure white, and he wore detailed golden armor that was similar, but far more extravagant than the guard who saluted him. Uh-oh. I was told a prisoner needed my attention down here. I hope this is quick. I'm supposed to meet my sister at the palace. He questioned in a lighter tone that surprised me. I'd expected him to have such a deep voice that the stone would crack around me. Maybe that was my nerves talking. Yes, sir. Arrested in the markets near a cafe on account of both petty theft and sexual harassment. Further, we think he's mentally unstable and possibly dangerous. The guard spoke up. My ears lowered with each word. Wow. Less than an hour in Canterlot, and I'd already been declared crazy. I wonder if this was a record. The stallion sighed and nodded before sliding open the bars. He stepped easily inside, not an ounce of fear despite me being dangerous, and casually lit a lantern that hung on the wall. I winced to the light and further curled up into a ball behind the wooden slab, shivering as it only reminded me of how nice heat was. I anticipated an interrogation was next on my schedule. Why is this stallion not bandaged properly? He's obviously injured, the white unicorn questioned, looking incredulously towards the guard who stood at his left. We dared not approach. Regardless, in the end, he came willingly, the guard assured. Willingly? Is that what they called blood loss and severe head trauma now? Unfortunately, I was more hurt at losing Twilight's pouch. I saw how painfully and lowered my head to my hooves. I exaggerated anyway. I doubted the little scratch to the side of my head did any more damage than the apples from the stratosphere or Applejack's hoof. No, that was also an exaggeration. I doubted Rainbow ever escaped the troposphere. The stallion shook his head above me and sat down. A light touch of magic surprised me, causing me to jump and shudder. The wound along the side of my head slowly healed in a gentle, silent light. I'm sorry for their rude behavior. I'd like to get the full story from you, however. Miss Fleur came to me, abashed after you had been arrested with some interesting admission that I'd like to verify, he explained calmly, completing the healing magic in record time. I glanced up at him and nodded, rasping out, I'll tell you anything. I'm sorry. I wasn't quite prepared to speak and coughed afterwards, my vocal cords feeling like they had frost on them. Relax. Just tell me what happened in your own words, he coaxed calmly, giving me a surprisingly assuring smile. In the light, I also noticed this cutie mark, which appeared to be a shield and a starburst alongside three smaller stars above. The starship looked remarkably similar to Twilight as well, and I started to relax a little. Yes, you might know me. My name is Shining Armor. I'm the captain of the Royal Guard, he furthered, smiling as he noticed me peek at his mark. Well, I'm kind of new here, so I don't know. It just looked familiar. I'm Mender, I muttered, weakly, looking back at him fully. He frowned, seemingly thinking for a moment before exhaling. That sounds familiar too, but I can't remember where. Anyway, Miss Fleur found her bag after you had been arrested and admitted she had erred in accusing you of theft. I guess that pink pouch is popular, he exclaimed, chuckling afterwards. The guard next to him widened his eyes and then looked away from me a moment later. Admittedly, I was surprised by the lax interrogation technique, but took the break if it was offered. Well, I'm thankful. The bag belongs to my filly friend. Can I have it back? I asked, trying not to get my hopes up. Shining Armor smiled, however, and nodded. Of course. You have very good tastes. I'm sure your mare will be delighted that you tried to protect it. In fact, I got a bag just like that for my sister last year. It's a wonderful gift, he assured, seemingly more amused at the coincidences than angry at my arrest. Well, if it was a popular enough bag, a lot of mares probably had it. Faraday probably had picked it up for Twilight. I smiled faintly and relaxed, still not feeling the best, but happy that I hadn't lost Twilight's pouch. She trusted me with it, after all. That little thing is really important to you, isn't it? You must really care for her, the guard captain observed, smiling warmly all of a sudden. I nodded weakly, looking back up at him as best I could. I was ravenous, having emptied out my stomach on the train ride and now missed lunch. What time was it, speaking of? Had I missed the party, too? She trusted me with it and asked me to get food for her and her friend. I care for her a lot and don't want to lose her trust, I explained, trying to be as honest as I could. Shining Armor nodded earnestly before seemingly thinking to himself. I'm under the impression that the collision wasn't entirely your fault either. Still, now that I know more details, I should at least extend the courtesy of sending a message to her about what happened. What's the name of your mare and where is she staying? He inquired, smiling now as he looked back down at me. I felt a little safer now and nodded, sitting up fully. Her name's... I started before the once silent guard walked up next to Shining Armor. Actually, I got his address in a statement prior. Here you go, Captain, he interrupted, cutting me off. Oh yeah, he had questioned me when I was first arrested. Shining Armor picked up the clipboard offered with his magic and floated it in front of him. I fell silent and let the captain read it over carefully. I'd answered all of the questions to the best I could manage, so I figured that would cut off a lot of any potential interrogation that was needed from me. Oh, interesting. You're staying in a castle suite? You must be here for the party. It's not the fancy pants is throwing. Ironic. I've got to bring you to the castle anyway, so I'll send a message and we'll meet your filly friend there, he explained after a good minute of reading. I shifted uneasily. Twilight had given me Rarity's room, but I had no idea what her own room number was. I'd hoped it wouldn't complicate things that I'd given them Rarity's instead. I nodded weakly, asking, Are you letting me go then? This is all just one giant misunderstanding, and I was really glad he was so friendly. Ponies really were a lot different than Caldarians. At that point, I didn't know why I was expecting otherwise. The worst part about this experience so far had been the cold dungeon. As part of regulation, I've got to get confirmation from the castle. Your filly friend shouldn't be a problem, but I also need to sign off on your release. The office is over there, however. Paperwork, right? He explained, smirking over at me. I snickered, feeling a lot better finally. His healing magic was top-notch. Thanks for being so understanding. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. What a day, I groaned. He also said tonight, I noticed. That means I hadn't missed the party yet. Todd would be mildly irked that I had not gotten them food, but at least it wasn't a complete disaster. Shining Armor laughed and shook his head. Relax. I understand what a bad day is like. You should have seen the changeling invasion, he exclaimed, signing off on the clipboard before passing it back to the guard. Changeling? I tilted my head, but then flattened my ears back as he fitted the manacles back onto my legs. My forelegs couldn't stop shaking as he fastened them. Why was this? Mender, relax. No pony's going to hurt you. You only have to wear these until we get to the castle and verify your story. It's just procedure, and I'll stay with you the whole time, okay? Shining Armor softly assured, patting me on the head. It probably mentioned my reaction to the change on the clipboard. Shivering, I managed a weak nod as he helped me up and led me towards the door. At least this will all be over soon and I could go back to Twilight. Groaning again, I tried my hardest to hide my face as best as I could. The cart slowly moved through the street, careful to let ponies move out of the way before passing. It was decided that I'd be transported to the castle via cart instead after I fell down 2 flights of stairs while wearing the manacles. Shining Armor was really good at healing magic. Still, this is more than a little embarrassing. Shining Armor himself sat at the front of the cart with the driver. I was in the back, trying my best to hide and wishing the sides of the thing were taller. The chains attached to me were easily visible, of course, and I saw dozens of ponies giving harsh whispers and giggles as I passed. Well, damn it. There goes the effect Rarity had been hoping for. She wasn't going to want to use me for showing off her suit if every pony knew I was a criminal. Shining Armor did his best to not make a spectacle of it, taking back street most of the way there before cutting out onto the main thoroughfare in order to get to the castle gates. The cart rolled through the gates and finally reached the sanctuary and privacy of the grounds, letting me exhale gently. Less ponies seeing me meant less rumors going around. Of course, 3 blocks of aristocratic-looking ponies had already seen me regardless, and if they were anything like what I was used to dealing with back in my old world, that, I recall, rumors would explode anyway. Okay then. Message was sent ahead via Pegasus, so we should be expected. I'm going to escort you to the assembly hall where they're waiting, and then once you're spoken for, I'll go upstairs and fill out your release paperwork, Shining Armor said, making his way around to the back of the wagon and helping me down. Slowly I nodded, putting most of my focus into not falling on my face. I'd fallen out of the wagon twice trying to get up onto the thing, but at least I'd landed on my butt then. Nosediving would suck considerably more. At least they knew I wasn't going to run anyway. Well, run away effectively, I penned into my thoughts a moment later. He smiled once I had all 4 hooves on the ground, and carefully led me towards the side gate to the right wing of the massive-looking castle. Shining Armor kept careful pace with me and kept his magic up to stabilize me as I wobbled, snagging my legs on the chains every half-dozen meters or so. The guard that was in the back of the cart with me followed a little behind us, from the sounds of it. It wasn't the same guard as at my cell, not that I could tell the difference anyway. Why do all the guards look the same? Security measure? Eh. The heavy door opened with a creaking noise, and it was a lot dimmer inside, lit by the warm glow of wall staunches. Heavy-looking marble tile decorated the floor, and a soft-looking rug led from the entry all the way along the hallway. Fancy-looking benches made of a rich oak of some sort lined the sides. This looked like a kind of waiting chamber or something. What did he call it? Assembly hall? To my absolute relief, both Twilight and Rarity were waiting at the far end of the hall. Rarity sat calmly on a chair, giving me a soft, if knowing smile to Twilight as she paced back and forth. I swallowed nervously. Even though I hadn't been here for very long, I could kind of tell my filly friend was frazzled. It wasn't a good feeling to be the source of that discomfort. Eh? Twilight! Shining Armor suddenly exclaimed, studying me from the start before trotting forward ahead of me toward the 2 mares. Twilight? Wait, was he talking to Twilight? I blinked and watched, surprised as she looked over in response to the name, shock evident on her face. Shiny? She asked, eyes widening rapidly. Shiny? What the hell? They obviously knew each other, but why did they have pet names? Wait, no, that couldn't be. Oh hell, no, Twilight would have told me! What are you doing here, Twilight? Wait, you heard I was bringing a pony over and intercepted, didn't you? I sent a message to your room saying I was going to be a little late, Shining Armor groaned out. Her room? Her room? My right eye twitched, the spasm traveling all the way down my chest right before like giving the chains a jiggle. Twilight didn't shrink down and she looked past Shining Armor and over at me. I glared in her direction, really hoping this wasn't what it looked like. No, if she were already in a herd with this town, some pony would have told me. They wouldn't have kept this a secret this long. They couldn't have. Shining Armor followed her gaze and peeked back at me. I snapped the glare off my expression, not waiting for him to decide to throw me back in jail. Oh, don't mind him. I'm just dropping him off to his Philly friend here at the castle. She should be here already, though, he muttered before looking around the hall. Oh, hell. If he found out I was dating his herd member, I predicted a lot of complications. Twilight just flattened back and she lowered her eyes, shifting them back and forth as if fighting violently with her thoughts in her mind. Rarity looked utterly speechless as she glanced between Twilight and Shining Armor, who finally noticed her. Wait, Rarity? Oh my! Is that why you two are here? Wow, I didn't realize the guest you invited with was your cold friend, Rarity. Is that why you two are acting so weird? He continued, seemingly a bit concerned that Nobody was saying anything. Rarity? Rarity let out a gasp of surprise, flesh exploding over her cheeks as her eyes widened at him. Twilight shuddered and rapidly looked over at Rarity as well, as if burned from on. Ah! Rarity? Of course! Thanks for dropping off Rarity's girlfriend. You can go now, Shiny. I'll talk to you back in my room, okay? Twilight suddenly spewed out. Several ice hammers hit me in the chest as I stared at her. My forehead started to shake, and I couldn't seem to stop them as I let out a sharp gasp. She was embarrassed about me and was pretending I was Rarity's cold friend? My ears dropped completely. Twilight Sparkle! Rarity suddenly shouted, shifting from looking shocked to righteously pissed off in half a second. Oh hell. Shining Armor must have thought the same thing as me as he hopped backwards away from the Unicorn, who was now standing up in her chair and glaring at Twilight. Twilight flinched and shrunk visibly away from Rarity, not meeting her eyes. The guard pony standing next to me made no motion to move any closer, just watching with wide eyes as the rather brutal and awkward scene unfolded. My mind was still reeling from the implications mixed with what Twilight had just said. I could barely process what was going on. I'm sorry. Shiny, meet Moonmender. He's the stallion I wrote about in my letters, Twilight finally admitted, shrinking down to the floor. She told him about me, but she didn't want him to know that I was me? She was embarrassed I was arrested then. I didn't know how to feel about this. A stallion close to her was the captain of the guard, so I guess I could see why she was appalled that I'd been arrested. Shining Armor looked back at me, eyes widening rapidly. Moonmender! That's why I heard his name before. This is your cult friend? He asked sharply. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know what to say, and he'd been arrested for something, so I panicked. I'm sorry. Twilight continued, standing up again and prancing anxiously in front of the much larger stallion. Damn it! Who was he? Did she honestly keep this much from me? I'm not the one you should apologize to. Fine. Stay here and I'll go get the stupid paperwork filed and get him released. I'll be back in a bit. He snarled out, sounding rather angry as he stormed off through his side door. The hallway fell silent and I dropped my head. This had gone from getting better to rock bottom almost instantly. My head was swimming with what I just heard and I didn't know where to even start sorting everything out. It didn't help that my eyes were getting watery and my chest hurt. The guard behind me gave me a soft nod and frowned before undoing my restraints. I heard hoofsteps getting closer in front of me but I refused to look up, staring at my hooves instead. He was charged with an account of sexual harassment and another of petty theft. Both charges have been acquitted, however. He's free to go. It was all a misunderstanding. The guard explained next to me as the movement stopped. Mender, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to lie about that. I panicked. This wasn't how I wanted things to go. Twilight muttered quietly. I shivered again, eyes softening. That much was obvious. Nothing today had gone as planned. Slowly, I looked up at Twilight, who sat in front of me about a meter away. Rarity was rapidly catching up, still glaring at Twilight's back as she approached. This is absolutely horrifying, Twilight. Even if embarrassed, consider Mender's feelings. The charges are false, and he is innocent regardless, so there's no need to feel ashamed of him. Twilight Unicorn scolded harshly, sitting down next to Twilight. I'm not ashamed. This just wasn't how I wanted Mender to meet my brother, okay? Twilight snapped back, too quick to be sincere. Brother? My exhale was instant and excessive as I slumped slightly. Shining Armor was her brother. The relief washed through me instantly and I couldn't help but smile a little. Her brother had... Oh. Her brother just escorted me as a prisoner to the castle. Okay, I could see why she freaked out now. It took me a moment to realize both members had stopped talking and were giving me questioning looks. Sorry. I didn't know he was your brother. The way you addressed each other, I tried to explain, quietly. Rarity blinked and then snorted, holding up a hoof to her lips instantly as if to hold back a sudden bout of laughter. Twilight suddenly shivered as a deep blush crept onto her face. I coughed politely and looked away again. Yeah, I was expecting that reaction. No! No! He's my brother, not... Oh, Celestia, no! You're my only co-friend, Mender! Tot rapidly corrected, not that it was needed at this point. The guard next to me averted his eyes from all this rapidly, and I could have sworn I saw a smirk starting to play at his lips. Ho, ho, ho! That would be scandalous indeed. But no, Prince Shining Armor is Twilight's brother, not lover. Still, that doesn't excuse him for trying to do that, Rarity reminded, shifting back to a stern glare at the lavender mare. Twilight sighed and nodded, not meeting my eyes still. I was just happy that I knew I didn't have competition, especially at that level. There's no way I could compete with the captain of the guard. Come on, Mender. Let's go back to Rarity's room. There's a comfy couch there we can lie down on, Twilight finally muttered, shifting the topic as best she could while gesturing towards the door opposite to the one Shining Armor had used. My ears perked as I glanced back at the guard, who outright snickered before shaking his head. I doubt it's going to be a problem anymore. I'll let the captain know where we've gone and try to calm him down a little, the guard said before I even opened my mouth. Admittedly, I was a little surprised, but nodded hesitantly. Well, today was still crap, but maybe now it would look up. I mean, what more could possibly go wrong at this point? Nope, I'd better not say that. It was always falling off the side of the cliff the city was built into. Why, thank you, dear. You've been extremely helpful, and I shall put in a good word with Shining Armor for you. Rarity spoke politely before looking back at me and shifting to a quizzical expression before continuing with, Wait, is that dried blood on your muzzle, Mender? Oh my. Let's go get you lying down, okay? I sighed and nodded wearily back to her. The day wasn't over yet. I'll explain on the way there, I excused, resigning myself to walking after Twilight, who had already turned and headed to the door she pointed out earlier. No, the day was still young. I'm probably going to get a lot longer. Seriously? 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, you managed to not only get yourself beat up, but accused of sexual harassment and theft. Then arrested! Twilight groaned out, staring at me with what could only be described as a look of dumbfounded shock. I kept my head down and ears lowered as I looked up at her from the couch, and a royal nurse carefully tending to my forehead. It annoyed me that head wounds bled so much. My fur needed to be cleaned now, and there was less than an hour before the party. Rarity giggled merrily behind Twilight, lightly sipping tea at a rather elegant wooden table. They had gotten food somehow anyway, it would seem. At this point, however, I was more worried about having made an idiot of myself and ruined Twilight's introduction to me to her brother. I'd humiliated her and further felt like crap because of it. Relax, Twilight. The charges were falsified, we got room service anyway, and you got your bit pouch back, Rarity pointed out sagely after setting her cup down. I was both happy and sad that they so easily managed to get food without me. After being hauled to the palace and changed, I had lost all sense of hunger, only to find out that my duty hadn't really been needed in the first place. The tears were enough to make me want to curl up in a ball and cry for a few hours. Pity that would make me feel like an even bigger wimp. At least Rarity had visibly calmed down now that she had gotten tea. It's all so embarrassing, though. This isn't how I wanted to introduce him to my brother, for one. Plus, every pony saw him hauled through the streets, and are going to think he's done something horrible, Twilight shouted, pacing back and forth in a tight circle. I shriveled further on the couch, making the nurse tisk as I flinched. Rarity gave her a speculative, questioning glance over her cup, but Twilight didn't seem to notice. Finally, I managed to suggest in a quiet voice, She's right, Rarity. I don't think it's a good idea to bring me as your guest anymore. Rarity surprised me by smiling warmly. Nonsense, dear. If brought up, it just simply make for an amusing story and correction. There's absolutely nothing negative to worry about, she assured, causing me to exhale quietly. Admittedly, her words put me a little at ease. She was willing to explain to ponies who asked and tell of my innocence. Twilight shook her head and resumed pacing. I don't know how you can be so nonchalant about it. I mean, it's so embarrassing. Doesn't it have, like, privacy carriages or something? The guards are supposed to be professional, she complained, moving at the target of her wrath, the prisoner to transport it would seem. It felt like she was just angry in general and lashing out at things. At least she wasn't angry with me. Still, I think I'd rather have her angry with me than ashamed of me. Rarity frowned outright at this point and set her cup down again, a little more forcefully this time. The noise snapped Twilight out of her spiral and caused both of us to look at the white unicorn. That's enough, Twilight! You know as well as I do that he is innocent. If it continues, spread that fact on to any who question, rather than worry about who it might influence your own reputation, she lectured surprisingly harshly. The tone was strict and demanding, leaving an almost unspoken dare to challenge her and get trounced. In my reasonably shaken mentality, it was more than a little intimidating, and I shrank further. Twilight, for her part, looked more surprised than anything. But I wasn't worried about... I mean, he's my son and I care for him is all. It's not like I was... Well, okay. I was a little embarrassed over the ordeal, but... She started to shakily protest, shifting back and forth on her hooves. Rarity's eyes narrowed slowly the longer Twilight went on. Lavender mere hesitated and slowed to a stop before sighing. Okay, fine. I was utterly horrified, she finally admitted. It hurt, but it was the truth. I knew that it was because of me as well, which hurt the most. Come on, one normal day is all I ask. You are ashamed. Ashamed of the stallion you claim to care about. That this is not you, Twilight. Rarity spoke quietly, earning a wince from all three remaining ponies in the room. The nurse oddly included as she blatantly listened on. I didn't care at this point, though. Twilight stayed quiet for an agonizing half a minute, shifting her gaze between the floor and myself a couple of times. I was ashamed as well, far too much to even look her in the eye at this point. What a mess. Why did it have to be me? Of course, I caught myself asking that quite often about various things. I wondered if that was just another way to run away. The nurse let out a yelp as I flailed about in panic from a sudden foreign set of lips on my forehead. Twilight backed up and simply observed until I stopped wiggling. I stared at her in surprise until she giggled and looked down again. Are you okay again, Mender? I should have asked you that a while ago. I'm sorry. She spoke softly, smiling weakly as her eyes caught mine again. My mouth was still open in shock. Becoming aware of it, I slowly closed it and exhaled quietly, having no idea how to answer. She suddenly decided to take Rarity's advice. My eyes lowered as I let myself slowly slide down onto the couch cushion again, letting the nurse resume her cleaning of the wound site. At least she said it wasn't nearly as bad as it looked. Damn head wounds. Did it, bring up any bad memories? The decidedly warm and comfortable lavender unicorn asked. Instead, she gave my muzzle and nose a light kiss. It tickled a little, and I smiled weakly. When they put the hoof cuffs on me, it did. I think I passed out shortly after, I replied, feeling a little more relaxed, but tired now. My body just wanted to sleep for a while and heal. Rarity perked up at the mention of my memories and listened intently. My friend just nodded against my nose before getting up carefully onto the cushion in front of me. She's right. You're innocent and I shouldn't be worried about myself. I'll stand by you too, Mender, she assured after a moment's hesitation. Well, I'll be. I guess you're telling the truth and not just helping some stranger escape jail. I'm also glad to see you apologized. I suddenly heard spoken in a familiar voice, followed by an even more familiar laugh. His absence must have put him in a better mood. She opened her eyes again and shifted them in the direction of the doorway to her chambers. I peeked as well, discovering Chinaman slowly walking into the room, still in full armor, but looking considerably more relaxed than he had been earlier. Maybe it was because it was warm over here, or he really liked filing out paperwork. course, Shiny. A little late for this, but meet Mender, my cult friend. Mender, this is my brother, Shining Armor, but you already knew that. Twilight introduced, smiling gently now and seemingly feeling better. It is good to meet you outside of a jail cell, Mender. Unfortunate series of events, that. But I have a feeling you're a good stand after all, especially after what you said about the pouch. He welcomed, winking at me. I blushed weakly and looked away. If I had known he was Twilight's brother, I would have stayed quiet about the whole thing. Huh? What do you mean? The now exceedingly cute unicorn in front of me questioned. Shining Armor snickered before shaking his head, however. Anonymity sometimes breeds honesty, Twilight. I know he deeply cares for you, which is enough to make me accept him as your cult friend, he assured with a smirk. I shook my head warily. Honestly, I'm just glad I got it back. That had me worried the most, I muttered, glancing back up at Twilight's brother with newly discovered curiosity. Outside of his post, he wore a relaxed expression, even in his armor. He was a little smaller than Big Mac, but it looked like he had years of experience behind his eyes. He also had a horn, and if he came from the same family as Twilight, I could only hope to guess how powerful he was. Twilight sighed and shook her head, however, drawing my attention back to her before adding, as much as I'm happy to have the pouch back, I'm just happy that you're okay. I caught myself blushing and smiled weakly with what energy I had left, searching her eyes for truth to that. If she was going to make an effort to trust me, I should definitely make an effort to trust her back. Our relationship hadn't been the smoothest so far, but maybe that would make it stronger overall. Her expression was earnest, however, and she returned a warm smile. I'm still curious as to why you felt so strongly for the pouch, Mender. Mary spoke up, smiling over her cup of tea at me a moment later. Her tail swished back and forth behind her in an oddly polite, sophisticated manner, as if on display with its fine curves. Chuckling, I shook my head again. Besides the fact that I was twice and she trusted me with it, it also had her bits in it, which was important, but for the honest truth, I myself have nothing to my name. Even the saddlebag I hauled things here with is twice. So for her to give me something so dear to her and almost lose it might bother me a bit more than normal. I speculated quietly, having just considered it for the first time now. It was just a feeling that was there. The diamond unicorn smiled and kissed me gently on the top of the nose again before being shooed away by the nurse, who was now cleaning my fur along my cheek. You're amazingly sweet, Mender. We need to have you start getting things of your own, however. You've honestly done a lot of hard work for me and my friends and deserve it, she added, not dissuaded by the nurse at all. Shining Armor chuckled, distracting me before I could protest. She's right. The letters she writes back to us are practically glowing about you. I could have sworn from the letters that you were twice my size, made of coiled iron, through fire with a wave of your hoof. He tossed on, smirking. Hey! Twilight practically shouted, flushing red as she whipped her head back and glared at him menacingly. I held back a chuckle before nuzzling her cheeks gently. She made a squeaky noise, but held her ground and smiled again, features relaxing a little. My. Normally I'd be chased halfway around the castle for that comment. He really has tamed you quite a bit, her brother teased further, dancing backwards away from her tiny electric shock blast. She growled and fired a second one at him as well. He started to dance backwards again while a hoof touched the sofa instead. A magic line arced along the floor faster than the lightning strike, and the large bear extended up in the same instant, totally blocking the small blast of electricity. He stopped and stared at it in surprise before Twilight glared at me instead. What? Are you taking his side? She questioned, eyes narrowing a little. Hastily, I nuzzled her again in assurance before explaining, just saving him from your wrath. I'm honored, Twilight. You don't need to be angry over it. She let out a soft sigh that rested against her cheeks. A second ticked by before she finally smiled against me and relaxed again. Alright. But only because you asked so nicely, she agreed, earning a snicker from both myself and Shining Armor. Interesting magic indeed. Physical contact creates it from the point of his left hoof, exactly like your letter stated. Your strength is in barriers? He asked after a moment's thought. I nodded at the partial answer. Barriers, transmutation, and alteration magic. I block things, change the physical forms of things, and change the metaphysical properties of things, I summarized, closing my eyes sleepily. toilet was warm and felt good against my now freshly cleaned cheek. The nurse stood up again next to the couch and left contact with my side finally. I've cleaned the sides as best I could, but I suggest taking a shower to get the remainder of the blood out of your fur. It's just a surface wound and has already ceased bleeding. There's no further trauma that I can detect with my magic, so you should be alright, she reported in her quiet, rather soft voice. She sounded businesslike, but gentle. Thank you, nurse, Rarity spoke up courteously in the background before adding. It's best if you do go do that now, Mender. Todd and I already cleaned up while you were, well, preoccupied, and I need to get you into your suit before the party. I had to speak. I had to admit, she spoke wisdom. Shakily, I slowly stood up off the couch and wobbled before finding my balance. One would think that having 4 hooves instead of 2 feet would make me more stable, but that turned out to be false so far. More legs seem to mean more ways to trip over myself in my case. Do you need any help walking, Mender? You did take a rather nasty hit to the head still, Todd asked, moving in gently to brace against my side. The image of her following me into the bathroom caused me to blush, and I rapidly shook my head. Todd raised an eyebrow at my display, but I caught a knowing smirk from Rarity as if she probably read my mind. Baby steps, Mender, the pearly, technically almost white unicorn reminded. I suddenly realized she wasn't talking about my walking issues at all and nodded back to her. Twilight deserved baby steps, and I was less likely to make an idiot of myself if I didn't rush anything in the relationship. Good idea, Rarity, Twilight agreed, nodding enthusiastically to her friend and totally missing the underlying message I suspected. Oh, Twilight, never change, Shining Armor agreed, rubbing her on the top of the head with and earning another questioning glance as I quietly slipped towards the bathroom while she was distracted. If she did indeed catch on, I had a feeling it would only be awkward. Temporarily drowning out the panicking Rarity in the background, I glanced around the massive multi-story ballroom with a sense of awe and scrutiny all at once. It was an extremely impressive structure, had it been fully intact, I imagined. Repairs from some practically apocalyptic disaster that had struck the room were still ongoing, it would seem, and I was mildly concerned about how structurally intact the entire room was. This is why Pinky was banned for 2 years from the room, Tut whispered in my right ear from next to me. I shuddered, my having put 2 and 2 together a few minutes ago and doing nothing to blunt the sheer horror of that statement. Hell, the stonework was completely shattered in a few spots. And you sure they've put enough back together for this party to be safe? I asked, glancing skeptically over at the stage near the massive bay window overlooking the cliff outside. Twilight sighed wearily and nodded after a moment's consideration. Well, they're professionals, I think. They wouldn't let Fancy Pants throw a party here if it wasn't safe, right? I think, yeah, probably, she assured. Crap. Her statement only made me more nervous. I stood up again and wandered along the wall, examining the support beams that had been put in place while they redid the inner masonry. They hadn't left any loose or jutting pieces of stone, so that was good. The wood they used also looked of high quality with proper supports. If there were any risk, it was probably in the ceiling near the 2 damaged areas, so the apparently newly replaced bay window by the stage and the front entrance to the room, both of which sported large wall craters. Parts furthest away from the support beams of the room were at risk of structural collapse that hadn't been reinforced. Of course, lacking X-ray vision, I had no idea what the supports looked like inside of the ceiling. Mender, I need your help, I suddenly heard Rarity call out. I turned to my left just in time to see the frantic mare speeding towards me, gorgeous dress swishing out with each shift of her back hips. I preferred to get within casual talking distance before asking, What is it, Rarity? You know I'll help you with anything. She paused, relaxing a little and giving me a softer smile. You really are, dear. These incompetent workers have not finished my stage and catwalk, sadly. This just will not do. The boss took sick leave of all things. How can one be sick when there's a fashion show to prepare for? I've informed them that I am recruiting you to lead them into the finalization of the stage, she summarized rapidly. I went from assured to shocked and finally a little panicked by the time she finished, of course. I don't think I'm qualified for construction like this. Besides, why would they even listen to me? I look like another party-goer, I pointed out, gesturing towards the rather impeccable yet highly uncomfortable suit that I was currently wearing. Even my mane had been styled, which felt more than a little awkward. Well, re-styled. Embarrassingly enough, I had managed to accidentally punch myself in the head while trying to get the suit on, causing me to have to go back and fix my mane up again. Thankfully, it was my left side that time, so I didn't reopen my wound. Rarity wasn't dissuaded in the least, however. Why, they'll listen to you because I told them to. After the wonderful job I watched you doing making Applejack's machine up from scratch, I have not even the slightest doubt this will be fool's play for you, she complimented, tapping into me doing it at the same time. My eyes lowered and I sighed. They definitely had a way with words. I'll try, Rarity, but only because it's you. I finally agreed to slow heading back the way I came towards the rather crude-looking framework of a display tent. Oh, you're an absolute doll, a true prince of a... Rarity started to coo, her sounding as if she were following me. Her walking voice ground to a halt an instant later, however. Huh? Slowing to a stop, I glanced back at her question, only to discover her staring blankly at me with her mouth still partially open mid-word. Had I done something wrong? Uh-oh, did I tear the back of the suit or something somehow? To my surprise, however, a faint pink tint shifted into her cheeks rather than any expression of anger. She closed her mouth in a heartbeat and coughed loudly, looking away from me. This only served to leave my mind a further confused mess as I tried to figure out if I should be running away or not. Sorry. Oh, and her stray thought distracted me. We must make haste, though, she excused a moment later, smiling back up at me with no trace left in her expression of what had been before. Weird. When she didn't want to, she certainly didn't wear her emotions at all. Regardless, I nodded to her and continued towards the construction. The basic structure looked very elaborate with the curves and outcroppings, but that's all it appeared to be. There was nothing existing on the wood at all, which concerned me. Whatever the walls were supposed to be made of had better go up quickly, or there was no way it was going to be ready for 1800 hours. If my guess was correct, it was probably a tent of some sort meant to hold fabric in place. Reddy zipped ahead of me and quickly pulled aside a tan pony in an orange vest who was wearing a solid-looking yellow construction helmet. Tufts of black mane stuck out from under the headgear, I noticed. She whispered to him for a moment before nodding. He returned the nod a second later and glanced up at me before walking over. The entire exchange took all of 10 seconds, leaving me wondering exactly what she said. The boss says you're going to help us with figuring out how to put together the rest of the tent? He asked dryly, sounding a little more than a little frustrated. Figure out? I nodded wearily, unsure of what to expect when he withdrew a rolled up piece of paper from his side bag. Ugh, good. I'm not trained in these blasted plans and whatnot. Can you make sense of them? He requested, offering me the roll. I couldn't place his accent, but that didn't surprise me, really. It was thick and the words almost felt slanted somehow. It was hard to describe. I took the roll with my left hoof, and he raised an eyebrow as it stuck without further assistance. I managed to trace along the paper and it unfurled under my manipulation, causing him to step backwards a few hoof lengths in surprise. Still, I needed to hurry, so there was no time for restraint. My eyes traced the lines of the paper, knowing that it was the structure plans almost instantly. My frown lowered further when I noticed the units being used. Centimeters? Meters? I watched the plan I'd made Alberta was in metric as well, because that's what I had been used to using. I rarely, if ever, considered thinking in terms of the old-fashioned Chaldean method. Still, this wasn't made by me, but was still in metric units. There was starting to be a disturbing amount of coincidences involved for my liking, but I shook my head rapidly and tried to focus. These are structural plans for the frame. You have most of it done already, but there's not enough structural support for the front curtain or the upper back ceiling where it connects to the changing rooms yet. I pointed out, gesturing to the same spots on their constructed framework. He wanted to look surprised before nodding. I thought it was a little light in the back. We don't want those poor mares having lumber fall on their heads. You heard him, team. Get on support in the back and get those front curtain rods up, he shouted, gesturing towards the group of a dozen or so congregating near the front of the frame. Rarity smiled pleasantly at the seeming results, but I shook my head. No, too slow. You're only going to need 3 or 4 ponies for both of these jobs. How do we start putting up the fabric along the front of the building at the same time, and we can get the job done even faster? I suggested, heading towards the rolls of fabric they had rested nearby. The headstand seemed yet again surprised, but I ignored him and touched my hoof against the rolls. The top one exploded into movement as it unfurled itself, rapidly sliding along the floor before coating the right side of the tent and rolling itself out over the frame. Oh, you don't have to actually help, Mender. They were simply having trouble figuring out what the plans meant, Rarity informed, charting up while wearing a gentle smile. I shook my head back at her, correcting. Actually, the back reinforcement isn't on the plans. Without any attachment to the back wall above the changing room exists, it's a serious danger to any pony passing under the arc and through the doors. That's right, I don't really have anything else to do until the party, so I might as well be useful. Twilight smirked off to my left and joined Rarity in front of me. That's very productive of you, Mender. Honestly, you'll make a name for yourself without needing Applejack's help. Although her words certainly wouldn't hurt. She had to give me a happy nod. That I blushed at and smiled after lowering my head a little. I wasn't really used to praise, but I was glad she was happy with me. My eyes widened subtly as I realized that it was important to me. I wanted her to be proud of me, her specifically. Rarity gave a happy murmur and nodded, agreeing with, Indeed, you're very kind, Mender. I can see why Fluttershy also likes you. While I wasn't asked specifically to be kind, Fluttershy absolutely oozed the virtue. And yeah, I just wanted to be useful. I wanted to fit in and actually contribute, to help these amazing ponies as freely as they accepted me into their lives. I'm going to be free as well, Mender. May I assist you in the construction of the stage and tent? Twilight suddenly asked, smiling politely with her eyes gently closed towards me. It was more than a little adorable. Oh, that's a good idea. Please do prevent him from accidentally tearing his suit as well, Rarity requested, giving 2 nods towards Twi. I chuckled, realizing that it was indeed still Rarity talking. She must have recovered from whatever bothered her earlier. Twilight snickered and nodded, pointing out, He's not going to tear his suit if he sticks to using magic anyway. I'll just help hold things in place. The same sound from before dropped his jaw, however, as he followed me back to the construction site. The element of magic herself is going to help put this together? He asked, watching her carefully lift up all 3 curtain rods at once. She smiled while focusing and nodded absently. Of course. You're already taking orders from my cult friend after all. I might as well help too. She reasoned, lingering and putting more than a little emphasis on cult friend as she said it. I blushed slightly, and the brat of a mare looked right at me after finishing the statement. She held the knowing grin on a cylinder as she was intentionally spreading it around. Careful. It won't be a secret for too much longer if you don't do some damage control, I warned, sticking my tongue out at her gently. I've been doing a lot of thinking about it. Maybe I don't want it to be a secret? Rarity's right, you know. Honestly, it's totally normal, and no pony is going to think any differently of me regardless. She resumed, blowing a strand of her mane out of her face while 2 ponies to each side placed the curtain rods into their locking bars. Chuckling, I shrugged absently. I was the one to question the topic, having no idea myself. If I had to guess, I'll probably treat you with more respect due to who you are, actually. I don't think you'll have anything to worry about, I reasoned. I was interrupted with a soft nudge to the shoulder, however. I glanced on her right, only to see a smaller-looking mare with a white coat and abruptly green mane. She was also checked out in the construction gear, so I assumed she was part of the team. Excuse me, Mr. Moonmender. We have the right side secured to the frame. Could you help us attach the left now? She asked politely, oddly looking a little nervous for some reason. I wish she hadn't heard what happened to the guard and thought my bad luck was contagious or something. So I said Luna told her that the guard had been hostile upon returning to the barracks, it turns out. Something about a mild concussion, muscle strains, and potential infection in awkward places from small animal bites. I didn't realize there was more than one squirrel, or had it been a chipmunk? Oh, sure, I returned, suddenly catching myself zoning out and snapping myself back to reality. She smiled innocently and nodded before gesturing to another roll of the heavy purple fabric. I released my mind to bear those holding the right side up attentively at first. My smile widened upon realizing that it was indeed secured to the frame. Exhaling softly, I slid the other roll along the ground with my barrier again before unrolling and hanging it up against the left side of the frame this time. I think your magic is getting stronger, Twilight commented, walking along my left as I went, having finished the job. Smiling, I nodded to her before she suddenly stopped and turned fully towards me, silently calling for my attention. I halted as well, making sure the fabric was solid against the frame before turning to look at her. What do you mean, who I am? She asked a moment later, tilting her head gently. Huh? Oh, the last thing I said to her, that's right. You're Twilight Sparkle. That name, from what I hear, is synonymous with a mixture of princess, celebrity, and superhero, I explained, winking at her. As predicted, her cheeks lit up pink almost instantly. Mender! I'm not that important, certainly not a princess, she complained, flattening her ears back and looking down from my gaze. Oh, but you technically are, Twilight dear. Your brother married a princess after all, which makes you royalty by relation. Rarity chimed in to make me jump a little. Looking behind me to the left, I saw her slowly trailing along, looking far more relaxed than earlier. It's hardly qualification, Twilight denied, giving her friend a deadpan look. I decided to redirect her, self-undercutting, correcting, well, even if you don't think you are, I do. You'll always be my princess. Twilight was important to me. At this point, I was determined to accept that. Sadly, the wrong mare squealed. Oh, that is absolutely gushing with romantic undertones. You are such a gentle colt, Rarity chirped, hopping up lightly on her back hooves and flicking her fleece back and forth rapidly, looking oddly excited. Twilight, for her part, just shifted her blush to crimson and stared at me, mouth parted slightly. I couldn't read her expression in the slightest, however. My ears dropped a little. I'm sorry. I tentatively apologized just in case. It's kind of getting instinctive at this point. Another taste I noticed I shared with Fluttershy. She snapped out of it, rapidly shaking her head. Oh, no. You just surprised me is all. I'd never had a Stallion say anything even remotely so nice to me before, apart from shining armor. I'm just starting to grasp all of this, I think, fully. You really do care for me, she muttered. The way she said the last word made me think she didn't really believe herself then, even. I nodded to her and lightly stepped forward, nuzzling the side of her cheek lightly. She was cute when she blushed, I decided. She pushed back into me at the same time, letting out a quiet sigh. Seconds drifted by contentedly and I smiled. I could have stagged this for an eternity and be perfectly content. My wrist twitched as it picked up a slight scraping noise of hoof against the floor to my left, however. Breaking away and looking over, I saw Rarity slowly retreating via backing up, her eyes fixated largely on the tile below her instead of on us. Rarity? I questioned, a little concerned at this point. She was acting strange again. She jumped, as if burned, however, looking back up at both of us just enough for Twilight to give her a confused look as well. Are you okay? The Omni Unicorn inquired, sounding as concerned as I was. Oh, of course, dear. I was just going to help myself to a bit of a snack before the party, she excused, settling her hooves again and seemingly puffing up almost. I gave her a skeptical glance and she looked away as predicted. Okay, that time she was obviously lying through her teeth. The fact that it was obvious only went to indicate how much whatever she was thinking about was bothering her. I'm sorry. I guess I'm just a bit forlorn is all. Don't mind me, she finally confessed, shifting to a warmer smile and looking back at us fully. What's wrong, Rarity? You can tell us, I pressed, shifting to face her fully instead. I let her do her thing, realizing she knew her friend a lot better than I did. Shifting as well, I simply idled next to her for support if needed. Rarity exhaled before thinking for a moment. I knew that look. It was the choosing my words carefully expression. Well, looking upon you two being so absolutely amazing together indirectly reminds me of what I don't yet have myself. I'm truly wishing that I too had found my prince. She looked sullen after having admitted it and lowered her gaze again quietly. Twilight frowned, eyes softening before she walked forward and gently hugged the white unicorn. I understand, Rarity. You'll find your prince soon, don't worry. Maybe he'll even be here at this party? Twilight suggested, smiling confidently at Rarity. The white and purple mare chuckled and leaned into her friend before turning. I wish I shared your confidence, but thank you. If he's half as polite and charming as yours, I should feel rightly delighted. Twilight's eyes widened for the briefest moment before she recovered her composure, adding a light frown. Huh? The frown was gone before I could so much as blink, however, replaced by a gentle, yet assuring smile. I'm sure he's out there, Rarity. Just keep your hopes up. I even kept my eyes open for you and direct any potential stones your way during the party, she offered, releasing Rarity and giving her a soft wink. Rarity laughed outright at that before making a tisk noise towards her. Oh, that would hardly be proper. But thank you, dear. You're a very good friend, Rarity replied, sounding genuinely better than before. I smiled too and nodded. If I knew what to look for, I'd try to help too. I was very good at judging character, though. Hell, half the time I couldn't even judge my own. I pondered it, however. Of course, if I had some thermal imaging cameras and photo scanning equipment, I would come right up an algorithm that could scan the crowds for potential matches with physical characteristics that Rarity looked for. Some simple conversation monitoring with directional mics would probably give a brief summary of their personalities, too. It would be hardly accurate, but it could be done. It would be a lot more thorough than talking to every stand at the party, that was for sure. Are you listening, Mender? Todd asked, nudging me in the chest slightly. I started and flailed in surprise. Huh? What? I asked, suddenly feeling more than a little embarrassed. Todd snickered and pointed out, I know you're stunned and I know you feel friend, so I'm not going to be mad that you've been staying at my flank for the past 30 seconds. Normally one wouldn't be wearing a blank look while doing so, however, so I have a feeling your head was elsewhere. My blush magnified, earning another series of snickers from Twilight, who, to her own credit, looked more amused than angry. Relax, Mender, I'm teasing you. I just wanted to let you know that Rarity and I are going to go get another snack before the party. You don't need me for anything else here, do you? She asked after another moment. Oh, no. I'll just finish helping them set up the tent then, I assured, trying to keep any negative tones out of my voice. Admittedly, I was enjoying their presence, but I didn't want to get in the way of any talking they might want to do privately, or their food, in case they were actually intending to get some. Given the reminder, my stomach let out a pained murmur, but I ignored it. I didn't have time to eat anything right now. If I had let anything slip, Twilight either didn't notice or decided not to say anything. She gave a gentle nod, eyes closed in contempt before turning away. We'll be back in a few minutes, she tossed out before heading after Eddie, who had already turned and redirected herself towards the rather impressive-looking buffet table. This time, I really did watch her as she walked away. Not necessarily her flanks, of course. Not that they weren't something to look at. Still, I found myself enjoying her presence more and more as she became more relaxed around me. She was slowly becoming less scary. As the negative feelings were removed, there was less to get in the way of the shockingly positive ones that I hadn't even realized were there in such force. Still, I knew better and reminded myself to exercise restraint and move at her pace, even if that meant waiting until the next ice age before progressing any further. On this planet had atmospheric shifts like that. I pondered it for a moment before I was nudged on the right shoulder again. Expecting her this time, I glanced over at the same air as before, who was now smiling this time. We got the left side secured. Could you help us with the roof now, Mr. Moonmender? She asked politely, perking a little after saying it. I chuckled and nodded, following her towards the back of the structure where the elevated construction platforms were. Well, at least this is going smoothly. Maybe I'd have a normal night at least as a compromise. For some reason, I was not holding my breath.